Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Gopi. Jashoda Nandana Raja Jana Ranjana. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Gopi Janna Vallabha Girivaradhari. Jashoda Nandana Vraja Jana Ranjana. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Jayam Vishnupada Paramahansa Parivrajaka Acharya Stotra Sat Sri Sriman Bhakti Vedanta Saman Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari. So, many years ago, Prabhupada wrote me a letter and said that I should read his books and explain them in my own words. So there is linguistic translation, like if you translate from English to Spanish or Sanskrit to English and so on. But there's also cultural translation. Making, and this is something that Prabhupada strongly urged us to do, to culturally translate. You find this, actually Tamal Krishna Goswami pointed out to me an important purport, things in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, I believe Madhya Lila, chapter 23, verse 105, I remember. And of course also 4th canto, chapter 8, text 54, where Prabhupada urges us to make Krishna consciousness understandable to modern people. Something which is, I guess, still hopefully in the process of sinking in. So, in that spirit, Prabhupada once wrote to me and said that I should read his books and explain them in my own words. So the Bhagavatam is very well known among scholars, even mundane scholars, as, among other things, a great literary work. It's considered one of the most beautiful, one of the most sort of sophisticated Sanskrit literatures ever written or composed. And so Prabhupada, in his translation and purports, was focused, like Arjuna focusing on the target, he was very much focused on making Krishna consciousness philosophically understandable. Online listeners, okay. what should we do about the online listeners? Anyway, so Prabhupada really, as far as I can tell, reading the verses in Sanskrit, the Prabhupada's translations, gave almost no attention to that aspect of it. He was basically entirely focused on communicating the essential philosophy of Krishna consciousness, which he did in a very brilliant way. He practically created his own language, I mean in English, but it's a brilliant presentation in which he was able, because we see so many translations from Sanskrit that are not brilliant and not easy to understand or not interesting. Prabhupada, and actually even Prabhupada said he was mostly concerned with the purports. Just Tamal Krishna Goswami, actually in his PhD thesis, that was the topic, how Prabhupada made these original contributions to Krishna conscious philosophy, not by changing the philosophy, but by finding brilliant new insights and brilliant new language in order to communicate it. So that's what Prabhupada was doing. And so rather than duplicate what Prabhupada has already done, and obviously I wouldn't do it nearly as well as he did it. So what I thought might be interesting to devotees and non-devotees alike is to present the Bhagavatam in a way that sort of preserves and captures that brilliant literary aspect of it. And if the way I'm doing it now, eventually, I mean, if I live long enough, you'll be able to carry in a little bag, the entire Bhagavatam. So I thought, as the saying goes, here goes nothing. I would read to you some of the chapters so you can see how it sounds in very literal English that's based very strictly on the Sanskrit verses. Is there a higher table? That's good. So, again, this has a specific purpose, certainly not to compete with Prabhupada in terms of powerfully presenting Krishna consciousness, because no one can compete with Prabhupada in that. But hopefully this will give you a literary taste of what the Bhagavatam really sounds like in Sanskrit, as close as we can get to it in English. So Vyasa said, Sutta, having thus spoken, Shaunaka, leader of those sages, engaged in long sacrifice and a master of many hymns or mantras, now spoke, highly praising Sutta. Shaunaka said, Sutta, Sutta, great is your share. O best of speakers, tell us the Lord's holy story, as Lord Shuka told it. In what age did the story begin, and where? With what motive? What inspired sage Krishna Vyasa to compose this anthology? His son Shuka was a great yogi of equal vision, beyond duality, with one pointed focus, and beyond sleep. Incognito, he appeared like a fool. Seeing Vyasa going after his son Shuka, The godly ladies shyly dressed themselves, though the sage was not naked. And of course, they did not cover themselves before his son, who was naked. Observing this wonder, the sage inquired, and they replied to him, "For you, a married man, there is female-male distinction, but not for your son of withdrawn vision. Wandering about the Kuru land as if mad, mute, and senseless, how was Shuka perceived by the citizens upon reaching the capital, Hastinapura? Also, dear Sutta, how did a dialogue arise between that sage and king sage Pandavaya Parikshit, wherein this Krishna scripture was spoken? At householders' homes, the greatly fortunate Shuka awaits only the cow milking, sanctifying that residence. O Sutta, they call Abhimanyu's son, Parikshit, a most advanced devotee of God. Describe to us his deeds and the great wonder of his birth. For what reason did that emperor, who increased the fame of Pandu's sons, fast till death on the Ganges, disregarding a supreme king's opulence? For their own welfare, enemies bowed at his feet, bringing him valuable tribute. Why did that young hero choose to cast away irresistible opulence and even his own life? Those dedicated to Uttama Sloka, Krishna, live for the world's welfare and prosperity. Live for the world's welfare and prosperity, not for themselves. How did he become indifferent and abandon a body that was shelter to others? Fully explain to us all that we asked you here. We consider you expert in the domain of speech, except for Vedic hymns. And I explained in a footnote there what that means. Sutta was expert in sacred history, but did not focus on technicalities of Vedic ritual texts. Sutta said, in the third turning of ages, yugas, when Dwapara fully arrived, from Parashara in Vasavi, a yogi, Vyasa, took birth as a portion of Hari, Krishna. Once sitting alone in seclusion on the Saraswati River, he touched water as the sun disk rose. That seer knew past and future. On earth, in every age, time's invisible force brings about reversals of each age's dharma. Observing the weakening of all material things caused by this age of Kali, seeing the people not believing, lacking goodness, dull-witted, of short lifespan, and ill-fated, Vyasa of unfailing vision pondered with divine insight the good of all varnas and ashramas. Observing that the Vedic four-priest sacrifice purifies people's actions, Vyasa divided the one Veda into 4 parts to expand sacrifice. 4 Vedas named Rig, Yajur, Sama, and Atharva were set apart, and Itihasa Purana is said to be the 5th Veda. So Itihasa is the history, or histories, Purana, historical anthology. Together they form a sacred historiographic genre. Four Vedas named Rig, Yajur, Sama, and Atharva were set apart. And Itihasa Purana is said to be the 5th Veda. Therein Pila preserved the Rig Veda. Learned Jaimini went to the Sama. Vaishampayana became a singular expert in the Yajus verses. Severe Sumantu was the sage of the Atharva hymns, and my father Romaharshana of the Itihasas and Puranas. As each sage arranged his own Veda in various ways, the Vedas, through disciples, grand disciples, and great-grand disciples, developed branches. Lord Vyasa, kind to the wretched, thus acted so that these very Vedas are grasped by dull-witted people. Women, Shudras, twice-born friends, and the simple lack access to hear the triad, the 3 Vedas, for achieving a greater good in their occupations. In order that these groups could have the greater good, the sage Vyasa mercifully composed the Mahabharata. O twice born, even when he was thus constantly engaged with all his soul for the greater good of living beings, his heart was still not satisfied. Reflecting in seclusion on the pure bank of the Saraswati, his heart not too pleased, that Dharma knower said this, quote, firm in my vows, I sincerely honored Vedic hymns, gurus, and fires, and I accepted the teachings. I taught the import of sacred texts through the device of Mahabharata, wherein women, Shudras, etc., truly see life's goals beginning with Dharma. Yet even though I am myself preeminent in spiritual knowledge, my powerful embodied self feels unfulfilled. Is it that I practically did not point out the duties to God that please pure souls? In fact, those duties alone please the infallible Lord. As he thus despaired, thinking himself inadequate, Narada approached the aforementioned ashram. Noticing his arrival, the sage rose at once to receive him and duly honored Narada, who was honored by gods. So, that's the whole chapter. And now I'll go to the next chapter. So, let's see. That was 4. Okay, 1:5. Sutta said, now sitting at ease, gently smiling, Vyasa, Veena in hand, the far-famed celestial sage, Narada, spoke to the Brahmin sage, Vyasa, sitting near. Narada said, Paracharya, great is your fortune. Sir, is your bodily self or your mental self satisfied by yourself? You created a great wonder, the well-researched and very well-accomplished Mahabharata, enriched with all topics. You also researched and studied Brahma, that which is eternal. Even so, you lament for yourself as if you did not reach your goal. O Lord. Vyasa said, all that you said of me is true. Even so, my soul finds no satisfaction. We inquire of you about the invisible, unfathomable root of this insatisfaction, for you are like the self of the self-born creator Brahma. Surely you, sir, know every mystery, having served the ancient person, the Lord of high and low, who by his mind alone creates, maintains, and consumes the cosmos, unattached to its qualities. Like the sun, you range over the three worlds. Like air, you move within, witness to the soul. By vows, by dharma, I immersed myself in Brahma, far and near, explain my deficiency. Sri Narada said, mainly you did not explain the Lord's spotless glory. So, in other words, Vyasa did the first bridge program. Mainly did not explain the Lord's spotless glory. I consider a viewpoint that does not truly satisfy him to be barren. O excellent sage, you did not consistently describe Vasudeva's glory the way you consistently praised goals led by Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. Clear minds consider finely worded language that never praises Hari's world-purifying glory to be a pilgrimage of crows. Swan-like souls dwelling in beauty do not delight there. The righteous hear, sing, and recite that speech creation that destroys people's sins. Each verse, even if ungrammatical, marks the infinite's names with glory. Though spotless and free of karma, knowledge does not shine if devoid of devotion to the infallible Lord. What then of action not offered to the Lord, ever lacking grace, even if unselfish? And so great is your fortune. Your vision will not fail. Devoted to truth, firm in vows, your reputation is pure. To free everyone from bondage, remember with full focus the deeds of the wide-stepping Lord. That's Urukrama. Otherwise, whatever else one tries to state with separate vision creates names and forms that never let the ill-situated mind find a resting place anywhere, like a wind-tossed boat. What a terrible thing is being taught for Dharma's sake. It is a great escape for those attached to their mundane nature. For by this teaching, they will insist, this is Dharma. Thus they will not consider its prohibition. By restraint, the clear-sighted are able to understand the joy of the unbounded Almighty. Thus reveal the Almighty's deeds to those who, by mundane qualities, have lost the self. Having given up one's Dharma and devoted oneself to Hari's lotus feet, if, being immature, one then happens to fall, what evil at all was there for that person? And for the undevoted, what value is gained from one's Dharma? An experienced person should endeavor only for the sake of that which is not gained by wandering up and down the cosmos. Like sorrow, one finds joy from another cause, by the deep force of time. One who serves Mukunda, Krishna, who liberates, surely cannot ever by any means return to material life like others do. Recalling one's embrace of Mukunda's feet, one who grasped the taste cannot wish to give it up. This universe truly is and is not the Lord, from whom the world's maintenance, destruction, and origin arise. Indeed, you personally know that. Even so, I showed you just a synopsis. With unfailing vision, know yourself, by yourself, to be part of the Supreme Person, the Supreme Self, the unborn, now born, for the world's welfare. Let the ascendancy of the great authority be more valued. It's actually literally what it says. The learned have ascertained that the infallible purpose of one's austerity, study, proper sacrifice, eloquence, reason, or charity is the regular recounting of Uttama Shloka's glories. Formerly, O sage, in a bygone birth, I was born to a certain maidservant. As a mere child, I was chosen to serve Veda speakers, yogis wishing to settle during the rainy season. As I served them, those sages, despite their equal vision, gave me mercy, for I was a disciplined, obedient boy, free of all restlessness, spare of speech, and not bent on childish games. Once, happily permitted by those twice-born sages, I ate their remnants, and that drove away my sins. As I thus proceeded with purified mind, a relish for their dharma alone arose in my mind, in my soul, arose in my soul. By their kindness, I heard them daily. Hello. During the class, could you just sit and not? It's a little distracting. Thank you. I appreciate you. This is also Christian. By their kindness, I heard them daily singing out Krishna stories that stole my heart. Listening with faith to those stories, step by step, I truly developed a relish for the Lord, about whom it is so pleasing to hear. O great-minded one, gaining relish in him, of whom it is so pleasing to hear, my mind did not deviate. Thus I see that by his illusory power, I, who am spiritual, beyond matter, identified myself with this gross and subtle body. Thus, during the autumn and rainy seasons, as I listened to those great-souled sages constantly singing of Hari's glory, devotion arose, driving passion and ignorance away from my soul. Thus I was steadily attached, submissive, free of mischief, a disciplined, faithful boy who followed them. As they were about to leave, being affectionate to those in need, they mercifully taught me most confidential knowledge spoken by the Lord himself. Thus I understood Creator Lord Vasudeva's mystic authority by which one reaches his abode. It has been clearly shown, O Brahman, that the cure for the threefold afflictions is action devoted to the Lord God absolute. O sage of good vows, does not the very substance that causes disease in creatures actually purify when medically applied? Thus people's methods of acting are all causes of transmigration. People's methods of acting are all causes of transmigration. Yet those very actions done for the Supreme affect the removal of material self. Knowledge actually depends on action, performed here for the Lord's satisfaction in a full spirit of bhakti yoga. While steadily performing actions by the Lord's instruction, one recites and remembers Krishna's qualities and names. And then one says, Om, we bow to you, Lord. Let us meditate on Vasudeva. We bow to Pradyumna, Aniruddha, and Sankarsana. Unquote. Thus, by manifesting the forms in mantra form of the Lord who has no material form, a person with perfect vision worships the Lord of sacrifice. O Brahmana, when I understood and practiced this, the Lord's own teaching, Keshava, Krishna, gave me knowledge, dominion, and devotion to him. You as well, with your vast learning, declare the Almighty's glory. For thus the learned fulfill their wish to understand. They affirm that constantly suffering souls will not otherwise stop the flow of their afflictions. So that's 2 chapters. So, any questions? Hope you liked it. What's that? This is actually what the Sanskrit, this is very literally what the Sanskrit says. What time does class end? What time is it? Maybe one more chapter, if you can tolerate it. I'll read the first chapter of the Bhagavatam, because when you hear what it literally, some of the literal verses, it's actually very interesting. Again, Prabhupada, I gave a lecture at Harvard at a conference on translation, and they liked it so much they actually published it. Harvard published it, in which I explained Prabhupada's translation style. So I think it's at the end of the end of chapter 3, where Sutta says that when Shuka spoke to Parikshit, I was there. So Sutta was in the audience when Shuka was teaching Parikshit. And he said, now I'm going to tell you what I heard. Excuse me. When there's a class, maybe you could, thank you. Use a little practical instruction here, I think. It's funny, one time when I was at Harvard, it's a different story, but I'm sort of curious to see what goes on in the memorial church they have in the Harvard Yard, which is non-sectarian. Anyone can do a program there. And the dean of the divinity school was giving a sermon, a lecture. So I went in there, I went into the lobby, and the usher wouldn't let me in. I mean, he was very nice and polite, but they had a rule that once the class starts, you can't disturb it. You can't go in and out, right? Just like your average Hare Krishna temple. But anyway, I was thinking, this is very classy. They actually take themselves seriously. And they teach the people in the congregation how important it is to hear. Yeah. So, we think we have the best thing for the public. I think it would help if we also kind of demonstrated high culture that I think would help people to believe that this is really higher knowledge. When I used to give temple classes on Sunday in one major American temple, this years ago, I had to put like 3 or 4 devotee ushers because people would just barge in, they just walk, literally walk right past the speaker, go up to the altar, do all kinds of things, and I mean, it just totally oblivious to the fact that a lecture was going on. So anyway, so my goal is to see Prabhupada successful. Every day we all chant Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine. Prabhupada, the savior of the Western countries from voidism and impersonalism. Last time I checked, the Western countries weren't saved yet. And it's interesting, I'm not saying we shouldn't glorify Prabhupada that way, but in the 4th canto, when King Prithu is being glorified at his coronation, he actually says, why don't you wait till I do it and then glorify me? So again, I'm certainly not saying we shouldn't glorify Prabhupada. I'm just saying that since we chant every day that he saved the Western countries, it might be interesting to actually help that happen. So we don't embarrass Prabhupada, because when he gave us that mantra, we were saving the Western countries. But last time I looked, it doesn't seem to be happening now. So since we cannot stop chanting Prabhupada's pranam mantra, it seems to me our only choice is to save the Western countries. Giriraj Swami, my good friend Giriraj, he told me a story, which is also, it's well known, he told others, which I think is extremely important. And that is just before Prabhupada left this world, he called in Vrindavan. Giriraj had gone there to be with Prabhupada, serve him. And so in the middle of the night, Prabhupada sent his servant to call Giriraj in the middle of the night. So Giriraj rushed to Prabhupada's room, and it was dark, so just like one candle lit. And Giriraj was sitting there wondering, like, what's going on. And then Prabhupada, indicated he should come up. And Prabhupada's voice was so weak then, because this was shortly before he went back to Krishna, that Giriraj had to put his ear next to Prabhupada's lips. And the last question Prabhupada ever asked him, and Giriraj, of course, is one of Prabhupada's most faithful and valuable servants. And the last thing that Prabhupada asked him was, when I leave, will my movement go on? And what Prabhupada meant by that, not officially, but as it is now, of course, which didn't happen in the Western countries. And so Giriraj replied, and as Giriraj told me the story several times, he was kind of giving sort of like the standard company reply. It's like, like if you work in a store or an airport and they tell you, yeah, if a customer asks this and you say that. And so Giriraj said, yes, Prabhupada, it'll go on if we follow the principles and chant Hare Krishna. Prabhupada indicated that's not enough. I mean, the Gaudiya Math, they were chanting Hare Krishna, it just didn't go anywhere. So Prabhupada said there must be intelligence. There must be intelligence and organization. So intelligence tells us that every day in every ISKCON center and even in, everywhere, in the homes of so many devotees, we glorify Prabhupada as the savior of the Western countries, even though our influence in the West has dramatically diminished. Prabhupada left. Of course, we give ourselves credit for everything from vegetarianism to veganism to interest, any type of interest whatsoever in Indian culture. Without any sociological evidence of it, we just sort of pat ourselves in the back for that. even though there were so many other groups, even when Prabhupada was here teaching those same sort of sub-religious principles. So anyway, just as they say, a word to the wise. I think the way to really take Prabhupada very seriously about himself, what he considered his mission in this world to be. Of course, Prabhupada said it so many times. He told me so many times that if America becomes Krishna conscious, the world will follow. Anyway, read one more at no extra cost to you. You have the bundle plan, right? So, this is very, very literally the first chapter of the Bhagavatam. Om, I bow to the Lord Vasudeva, he from whom this world's birth, sustenance, and destruction take place, he who is self-ruling, he who knows all things, directly and indirectly, who extended absolute knowledge to the first scholar's heart, about whom the learned are baffled, in whom the creation of three, which is the productive, sustaining, and destructive powers of the three material qualities. Like the interaction of fire, water, and so, in whom the creation of three, like the interaction of fire, water, and earth, is not false. On him we meditate, supreme truth, with his own abode, for in him deception is cast away. For the virtuous who do not envy, here is Dharma. It's interesting, if you study the first two verses, like these great, giant verses, the first two verses of the Bhagavatam, they both have sort of like these literary themes. In the first verse, the theme is always repeating different cases of the word who. He from whom, who is self-ruling, who knows all things, who extended absolute knowledge of the first scholar's heart, about whom the learned are baffled, in whom the creation of three. And then the sort of like the literary theme in the second verse is here, the word here. Very emphatic. So listen again to this translation and focus on the repetition of the word here. These are very intentional features of Sanskrit composition. For the virtuous who do not envy, here is Dharma that shuns deceit. Here real reality can be known, giving grace, uprooting misery's triad. Real reality is a very literal translation. Uprooting misery's triad. Now that the great thinker composed the glorious Bhagavatam, why other books? Here, the diligent, eager to learn, instantly capture the Lord in their heart in a moment. O tasteful people who delight in beauty, drink and drink again this nectar, the Bhagavatam, till the end of your days. It is the succulent fruit of the Veda desire tree, sweetened with nectar flowing from Shuka's lips, of course the parrot's lips. So first, now the actual verses. That was the introduction. In the forest called Blink of an Eye. You didn't know that? Yeah, that's Naimisha. In the forest called Blink of an Eye, a land of unblinking gods. Because it said the demigods don't blink. So it's very beautiful literature. In the forest called Blink of an Eye, a land of unblinking gods, seers led by Shonaka, aiming for heaven's realm, sat for 1,000-year sacrifice. Now, one morning, these sages, having offered into the offering fires and honored the seated Sutta, respectfully asked him thus. The seer said, O sinless one, you who truly studied and recited ancient chronicles, histories, and Dharma scriptures, the best of Veda knowers, Lord Badarayan and other sages who know the far and near, know these works. By their mercy, O gentle one, you know all this in truth. For gurus must explain even confidential knowledge to an affectionate disciple. In all these subjects, O long-lived one, kindly explain to us truly what you determine to be the ultimate good for people. Worthy one, in this Kali age, people mostly live short lives. They're weak, very weak-minded, weak in fortune, and prone to calamities. So that repetition of weak, of course, is the Sanskrit, manda. Mandasu manda matiyo manda bhagya. They're weak, very weak-minded, weak in fortune, and prone to calamities. Yet one must learn by category numerous scriptures. In other words, he's saying that, and yet it's hard to advance because of, it's very complicated. Yet one must learn by category numerous scriptures, each with numerous duties. Therefore, sage, thoughtfully extracting the essence here for the good of living beings, speak that by which the soul finds great joy. Bless you, Sutta. You know what the Lord, leader of the Sattvas, wished to do when he took birth from Devaki and Vasudeva. We yearn to hear. Please explain to us the Lord's avatara, his descent for the safety and prosperity of living beings. Caught in the frightful cycle of transmigration, one can be quickly saved by spontaneously calling out his name, for fear himself fears it. Sutta, sages who walk the path of peace and are fully sheltered at his feet, at once purify on contact. The waters that roar through heaven do so only after repeated visits. The waters that roar through heaven, that's literal. Sacred verses praise the Lord's deeds. Who indeed, desiring a pure life, would not hear the Lord's glory, which strikes down Kali's corruption? The learned proclaim the Lord's noble deeds, celebrated by the learned. The learned proclaim the Lord's noble deeds, celebrated by the learned, as he playfully presents his portions. So, wise Sutta, narrate the splendid avatara stories of Lord Hari, who freely enacts his pastimes through his own mystic power. We do not weary of Uttama Sloka's adventures, for they are so sweet at every step for listeners who know taste. Disguised, pretending to be human, Lord Keshava, with his brother Rama, truly performed superhuman acts. Realizing that Kali has come, we are staying in this Vaishnava land with a lengthy offering, giving our time to stories of Hari. We seek to cross over hard to cross Kali that robs people of goodness. By providence, we have encountered you who are like the captain to cross the sea. Tell us, to what shelter did Dharma go now that the Yoga Lord, Krishna, friend to Brahmins and Dharma's shield, returned to his own abode? Anyway, glad you liked it. So any questions? Maybe. If I can find an artist that can do pictures that actually look like Krishna. I like realistic art. It would be nice to see pictures of the sages in Naimisharanya. So, yes.
Krishna. I was thinking that as you were going through it, you must have been getting fresh insights on not only the layers of depth to each verse, but also the reasons why Srila Prabhupada translated as he did. I wonder if you could share any realizations that came about due to seeing the difference between the literal translation and Prabhupada's translations.
Well, Prabhupada's translations have astonishing spiritual potency. And they're brilliant. The purports. Prabhupada, toward the end of his stay here, he actually was planning to have his disciples translate the verses, and he was just going to do the purports, because really it's the purports. And in fact, there's a whole chapter, I think, in the third canto where Prabhupada just had them just take it verbatim from a Gita Press edition of the Bhagavatam. So, I mean, Prabhupada was aware that, literal translations you can find here and there. But his purports are, literally world-changing. Purports are so powerful. So myself, being less Krishna conscious than Prabhupada, and still appreciating things like great literature in this world, it's Prabhupada. That was Prabhupada's first instruction to me. Just as Prabhupada was revealed, his life mission was revealed to Prabhupada in the first instruction his guru gave him in that first meeting. By Prabhupada's mercy, he also gave me that mercy, because the first letter I wrote to Prabhupada after I'd been in the temple a few days, I was a student at Berkeley, and I really was not mature enough to I was definitely not mature enough to handle this dramatic, powerful revelation that I received from Krishna that utterly changed my life. And at the same time, sit in a mundane university and, hear a lot of this and that. So I just didn't have the maturity. So I wasn't sure what to do, and I was 20 years old, so women know what a 20-year-old male brain is like. So I wrote a letter to Prabhupada. Actually, I asked the temple president, Hasduta, whether I should stay in school. He said, I don't know, ask the regional secretary. So I asked the regional secretary, who was a brahmachari. He was regional secretary for the West Coast, a brahmachari named Tamal Krishna. So I asked him whether I should stay in school, and he said, that's the way ISKCON was. He said, I don't know, ask Prabhupada. So I wrote a letter to Prabhupada, and Prabhupada, it's like in the early part of the Old Testament where people just sort of go up to God and ask him questions. It's like this little Middle Eastern family. And so I wrote a letter to Prabhupada, and Prabhupada wrote back and said, I should stay in the university. He said, I want you to be nicely educated so that you can explain Krishna consciousness to similarly educated people. So that was Prabhupada's instruction to me, and that became the purpose of my life. So, and Prabhupada, again, he wrote me a letter. It's in Veda-based, saying, read my books and explain them in your own words. So my own words are very much kind of Western, literal translation. Whereas Prabhupada, I never explained it. Oh, sorry, I mentioned something. I never completed it. The last verse of chapter 3, where Sutta told the sages that I heard from Shuka, I personally heard from Shuka, and now I'm going to tell you what I heard. And he says, Shava Yishyami, which literally means I will make you hear. In other words, I will explain it to you. It's the causative first person plural of the verb to hear, shru. But he says, I'm going to recite this to you, yatha dhitam jatamati. And so yatha adhitam literally means literally. That actually literally means literally. I'm going to literally tell you what I heard from Shuka, but also yatamati, and also according to my realization. So Prabhupada, as he himself said, putting some of the purport into the translation, he is following Sutta and Shuka. That is, explaining, what you've learned in parampara, you teach it literally, but also according to your realization. And the English word translate also can mean explain. Like if someone says, let me translate that for you. What he's really saying is he wants your money. And so translate can mean explain. So as far as my realization, I felt that Prabhupada's blessing me to carry out that instruction, read my books and explain them in your own words. And as I started translating the Bhagavatam, actually, I translated all the verses in the Bhagavatam, the part that we did. And the last 10 chapters, I had Gopi Pranadana do it to, honor him for all his valuable service. But otherwise, I did all the final translations and all the purports. But the BBT, as they revealed to me, took my name off it and said it was done by a group. Because at a time when many gurus were falling down, they thought, well, if he falls down, we'll have to do the whole thing over again. So that was very honorable. Anyway, so just for posterity. So I thought that would be a really good way to serve Prabhupada. Like, let's say you go to a bookstore. Someone goes to a bookstore and buys a copy of the Iliad or the Odyssey or the Bible or some other book like that. I know myself, if I had to buy two books, let's say they had different editions, and one was sort of a very literal, scholarly presentation. The other one was, let's say there was a grand master who sort of explained everything in a somewhat non-literal way. I mean, both books would be important. And in Prabhupada's case, we never would have understood these books without him. We never would have understood Krishna. But there are many Western people who want to start with the literal version. That doesn't mean they're going to come to a better understanding. It just means that's Western culture. And that was Prabhupada's instruction to me to read his books. I mean, I understand anything about the Bhagavatam only because of Prabhupada's teachings. Otherwise, I wouldn't have the slightest idea what this is about. But for Western people who often, especially educated Western people, who are not part of a tradition, want to just know what the book says. What really kind of Krishna arranged an experience for me that really got me thinking in this way. I was on a plane going to India. I think it was on anyway, one of those big European jumbo jets. And so I was walking down the aisle. I walk a lot on flights just to stay healthy. So I was walking down the aisle, and these two Americans, looked like businessmen, they're on suits, and they were flying. And they were curious. They kind of stopped me, and hey, because I was wearing these clothes. And so I thought, so then, we chatted, and then I came back there half hour later, and I gave them like a little book. I think it was Perfection of Yoga, one of those little books. And this is, of course, a long flight. It's like an 8 or 9 hour flight. So I passed them again, and I think I said, like, what do you think? And they said, it's nice, but I think we'd rather read the original text. And so that really stuck in my mind, not in the sense of there was any imperfection in what Prabhupada did. To the contrary, his books will save the world. But that if we're trying to bring people to Prabhupada, then, you may have to have a little literary bridge. Because if the goal is to bring people to Prabhupada, then the question is, what's the best way to do that? Or what is among various ways? And so that's why I decided I would do this, to bring people to Prabhupada. So we'll stop here. Thank you very much. And thank you, Prabhupada Priya, for offering to bring the computer back. What? I know, but someone has to carry it. So, who would like to carry a computer? What's your name? Oh, Kunti, I know you.